everybody. As you can see, we're finally here in person.
Look, touch.
We just realized this is our first in-person Hints from HR that we're doing. So it's very special for us. And because we just are coming out into the world again, we figured what better topic to talk about on today's show than burnout. So welcome everybody to the Texas Apartment Association's Education Foundation.
Maybe you look a little burnt out because we are. No.
Well, you just have a great tan right now.
I do.
That's what's just happening.
Yes.
Because you were, and we'll get to it on how to recharge our batteries.
Yes.
So
I wanted to do some work, like some pre-work for the episode. So
yeah, no, and it looks great too. This wasn't makeup. We didn't have any costume or makeup design today. This is what you see is what you get. I'm Blaise Spitaleri with Gemstar Construction, and with us today we have
Becca Ramadi with the Texas Apartment Association Education Foundation.
woo! Hi, I am Nicole Block with Brookfield Properties. So glad to be here.
excellent. So like we stated on the top of this introduction, we are going to talk about burnout because I feel like everybody's a little bit burnt out. We've all felt it. We've been through a pandemic, about 16 months of it. And then there was like 2 months of anticipation of the pandemic as well when it first started leaking. So I think there was like all this anxiety, and then we got into it, and it just kind of snowballed into what.
And then we had Snowmageddon, right?
Yes.
So talk about a snowball.
It was a perfect segue into the winter storm that got us all like really just back into a crazy mode, into the summertime in our industry, which is typically a pretty busy time of the year. So
it's been a roller coaster to say the least. And
well, it's kind of one you can't get out of. It's like they snap you in, and maybe a nightmare, right? Like you can't get the bar, and then it's going again, and it's going again. So that's a great analogy, especially when you feel like you can't get off the roller coaster.
And there's been an episode or two where we touched on like mental health and trying to stay proactive and trying to deal with some of the aftermath of COVID. And we know that everybody's probably been affected by this somehow, right? Whether it was like your family directly affected by maybe somebody that was ill, maybe it was yourself that was ill, maybe you had loss of loved ones, loss of jobs, changing of careers. There's so many things that we needed to really address through this. And I'm really glad we're here talking about it because we want to ask the question, and maybe Becca, since you're next to me right to the left, how have you been taking care of yourself through everything?
It's a good question, and I think that definitely not well enough because, you know, we're particularly women are programmed sometimes to think about everybody else first. I would say the biggest thing that has been and continues to be helpful to me, obvious or surprisingly or not, is my dog, because he forces me to go out and walk. And so that has helped a lot. I actually think that's been a big key for me. So the dog's been helpful. Thank you, Kirby. He sometimes comes on to him.
I know he's very upset. He's like, "Mom, where are you? I normally see you in the background." But no, he's in Austin. We are not in Austin right now.
Yeah, there's a great song called Kirby. It's about an emotional support cat. Though, but close enough.
Close enough.
Yeah, and real quick, Nicole, how have you been taking care of yourself through all of this, and have you been?
Yeah, I think similar to Becca, I think we talk a lot about awareness, and it's of yourself, of your surroundings, and so I think that as an industry, really as a country, as a world, we have to recognize that we're still in transition. So we've kind of gone through what I would say the lockdown kind of formation of burnout, but there's a whole nother evolution that's coming our way that we're going to discuss a little bit from our perspective. But I would say that I got better at establishing a routine. So when you work from home, then the lines between work and home life get blurred, and so sometimes you work too much. And I think I tried to set realistic boundaries probably over the past 6 months, and that's helped. I was able to go on my first vacation, which is where this tan came from. I was able to go to Jamaica and celebrate things like my son graduating from high school and not letting that pass by and making it a COVID thing. No, he graduated from high school and we were going on a senior trip and having a great time. So I think putting those types of parameters and just in place to protect I would say we're still in burnout. All of us, three of us are talking about it, but I think setting up those parameters will help us to heal a little bit faster.
Absolutely. And actually, so it's really important. I just want to tie back in because this is Hints from HR. So this is all human resource related. And I think this first question kind of dealt with like PTO, right? And maybe I know the only time I've used my PTO over the course of these like 16 months were usually something that wasn't very relaxing, or it wasn't a situation where I really got to reflect and get some me time. So it's been that roller coaster ride, and it's been constant like that. So I think it's really important. I'm really kind of a little jealous that you just got to go on your vacation, and I'm hoping soon that I get that same opportunity. Because if you're listening out there, take the time that you're going to need and really recharge your batteries a little bit, because we're starting to come out of this pandemic. We're in person.
Yeah. Hey, big step in the right direction.
Yeah, totally. And we want to make sure that everybody, when you come back, you make the adjustments.
Well, but let's talk HR side of it. So, one of
Please.
the things that we try to do, with our audience here, whether you are an operator or a supplier, maybe a job seeker, as we've talked to the audience too, is that you still have to be methodical. So yes, we all want to have that vacation. Yes, we all want to kind of force relaxation, if you will, but you have to be methodical with it, because everyone has extra PTO probably. No one got to take vacations in 2020. So you have to be even more intentional, sitting down with your teams and saying, we want to balance your mental health and balance the business. So, again, scheduling it out but putting attention to it. I think what happens, especially this year with Snowmageddon coming out of COVID, is that we're still in that kind of fight or flight, emergency mode, not being really intentional about the decisions we're making. And so before you know it, you're going to be in the end of this year, you haven't taken a vacation either. And maybe there are some opportunities that as a company, take the directive and make sure that your teams are taking their vacation, because we all are going to have a lot of pent-up vacation. We can't all take it the last month of this year. We can't just close down multifamily. Sorry, guys, we're closed in November, December. Yeah, exactly. So I think being intentional and starting to ask those questions, if you haven't, you can't just throw around terms like burnout without really digging in and seeing what it means to your team and what it means to you. They become like catchphrases.
Yeah, and you're bringing up actually a really good point, because I think with that, there's been a lot of people been working from home, working remotely, then kind of go into the office sometimes. And I feel like there may be this stigma about like, now I need to go to the office full time. Like, I can't take time off right away again. And you're not really taking time off again. You're just adapting now to go back into the office and get back into the routines again. And, a lot of people's priorities have changed during that.
Yes.
I know we were kind of discussing about a minute or two right before we jumped on, and maybe you want to touch base on it again, but like how our priorities have changed a little bit too, by a little bit of self-reflection or changes in maybe what our personal life and our career have thrown at us during
what's
this.
possible now. We can look at things differently now than we would have 18 months ago.
Absolutely. Well, I think that, whenever we advertise this particular episode, we talked about burnout, and we want you to really, take, again, a good, long, hard look at yourself and see where you are in the stage of burnout, because we guarantee you're in one stage or another. I mean, you're either coming into it, coming out of it, maybe you're in the thralls of it. But there are some things that you can't stay stuck. You have to make decisions and prioritize what is important to you in a career moving forward, what's not negotiable. Like Becca just said, some things like working remotely it's been something we really kind of turned our nose at as an industry in the past. And now we've seen that there's a functionality to that in some roles. So I think that asking yourselves those questions, what we discussed a little bit before is that I had just seen a study earlier this week that approximately 40% of the workforce is either currently considering other opportunities or have already considered other opportunities. And that's a pretty big number. 40% of the workforce, that's not just multifamily, that's going to be nationwide. So it could be people coming into our industry, people coming out of our industry. And I think probably the number is higher for multifamily in Texas because of Snowbit. That's my personal opinion. So you need to, as an HR group or operator, again, supplier or job seeker, make those priorities. Make sure that you understand what's not negotiable, what is important to you, because people in 2020 were just trying not to get laid off. They were trying to hold their job. They were doing whatever they could to just grin and bear it. And now they had a lot of time to do self-reflection. They had a lot of time to think about, what do I want in a company and a culture? Maybe they have it, and that's amazing. But if they don't, then it's their opportunity to be like, you know what? I just made it through a life-changing pandemic. it's about my happiness and my fulfillment. And they're actually calling it the Great Resignation. So there was that term was coined, if you want to look it up, in May of this year, because they're like, because so many people are going to transition. And we actually talked about it. I'm not saying we predicted it, not we give the credit, but probably like 4 or 5 episodes.
We're basically like Nostradamus.
I mean, basically, but we talked about the importance for HR companies to really enhance that culture and connect with their associates now more than ever with things like mental health and wellness and PTO and flexibility, and just making sure that connection, because we didn't call it the Great Resignation, but we said that people were going to start jumping jobs as soon as the pandemic was kind of waning.
And there's a lot of people still in limbo too, trying to still analyze that as we're getting back to what it all looks like.
And things that those companies have done during that time in terms of mental health and wellness and taking care of their employees are going to matter. So hopefully you've gotten some good tips and you'll be lucky.
Have you helped or hindered your cause? I don't know, but I think
Exactly.
it's a valid question. And to Blaze's point, we're just now starting to see this. You know, COVID was a 16, 18-month process. I think that the healing from that is going to take just as long to kind of feel normal, for lack of a better term. But normal is one of the things we were going to talk about. Like
what does that even define as anymore?
I
think that's I think it's unique to the individual, right? I think the normalcy has changed so much kind of with everything. But instead of going like on a personal level too, we all work with teams, right? So how are our teams adapting to this too? And I'm sure we know people that we are surrounded ourselves with that work together in our industry, whether on our team or on maybe a team of industry veterans that you rely on, your mentors, mentees, they're burnt out. So how are you helping one another? How are you approaching that? Because I know we all see it. Maybe Becca, you maybe want to jump into this one first, and then
I think it's hard. People want different things, and again, it's making those decisions on what's your priority, what's something that you're willing to go back to or not go back to, and those scenarios. I think, but the part about teams is that if you have a teammate who's unhappy, that's going to drag a lot of the team down, and so working with that person or people to help them figure out what they need, I think is really important, because teams are that. They need everybody to work together for it to be successful.
And I think that go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and if you don't exactly know what we're talking about, go back and listen to a lot of the previous episodes. Touch base on like everything.
Don't do a Netflix binge, do an Education Foundation podcast binge.
Exactly. But jump in on the team aspect.
So I think the team aspect, some of the things that we discussed is that, like we just mentioned, kind of understanding what, as your own individual contribution, what is not negotiable and what is. When you have your teams, I mean, think about what was commonplace in 2019 that is not commonplace any longer, and think about what's changed forever, right? I mean, I think Zoom. I wish I had stock in Zoom, but now that's changed forever. But I think one of the unintended consequences of that is that so we're all together because we have the Texas Department Association's board meeting this week in Grapevine. So in-person meetings, it's ironic, whereas those are one of the things that we missed initially, right? We're like, oh my gosh, we just want to be in person. Sometimes I've heard on the flip side, like, oh, I've got to go get in my car. I've got to go drive to a meeting.
I have to get dressed.
I have to get dressed from the waist down. I've got to, but I think that the convenience of Zoom has started to become something that we probably didn't, think about. And whereas we wanted, we think, oh, everyone's going to be so excited to be in person. Well, no, I mean, I think that they're thinking, gosh, I don't want to spend an hour in my car for a 2-hour meeting for an hour home.
Or a 4-hour drive to Grapevine to do a Zoom live.
That's
I joke.
But I think that's going to have a ripple effect on our industry. The Education Foundation, hello, education. So just last week, the Apartment Association of Greater Dallas, I taught a budget class, and we went ahead and we offered it in person in the morning and the exact same class online in the afternoon, because we had people interested in both. And so I think, and that was the first class they taught in person, which ironically, I was their first class last year that went totally online. So I think it kind of came full circle. But I think that was important. But I think that there's definitely some feedback to the online people that, hey, I don't have to spend half a day gone from my property. So I think that, but we need to be able to build the value for both. And I think talking to the teams, things like interacting with customers face to face, that makes people nervous. Still, even coming out of the pandemic, forcing people to wear masks, at least now with at least the state mandate's a little bit different, but some companies still require their associates to wear masks. So it's just still navigating all of that and understanding what's here forever and what's not will be important.
So you made a great point though, and I want to touch on education.
Yeah.
Because Education Foundation, and we're here obviously for education right now for TAA,
Sure.
but I do want to just throw out one last thing about like the team building aspect. Like
Yeah.
now is the time to really get together your teams and kind of build that unity again, and maybe learn from one another's experiences and really just get back to the basics of the roots of your foundation, of your organization. Make sure everybody's on board with one another and do some fun activities to build everybody's spirits back up, work together as a team, and then maybe reiterate. And actually, before we get to education, because it's something just triggered. Because I think we kind of discussed this too, of maybe shaking up duties, like your job responsibilities and what your career responsibilities look like and how to work with one another. And maybe it's cross training or whatever the case may be, but just not to have the monotonous feel anymore.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts on that, Nicole? Maybe you jump off on that.
Sure.
And tell us what you think.
Yeah, I think flexibility is key. I think growth and development is really what's one of the main reasons that pre-pandemic, we'll have to see what happens post-pandemic, that people would leave companies. They say that you leave managers, not necessarily companies. And I think that the culture plays a role in that, but also that growth and development focus. And I think that as leaders, coming out of this pandemic, we really have to double down on the message that we're sending, because everyone only focused on emergencies for a year and a half. That really was it. And so now we have to go back and kind of fill in the cracks and say, you know what, are you living your culture? And if growth and development is a piece of that, are we cross-training? Are we going back? And I think that there's going to be a little bit of an aversion. I think as leaders, we need to be patient, because we're asking them to do more than they have been doing in the past year and a half. It doesn't mean they never did it, right? And I think that that's, sometimes as a leader, I'm like, 2 years ago, you totally would have done that. But you have to go back and think, okay, we've been through something.
So completely unusual and unexpected and
absolutely
not in the manual.
And I want to throw something out from the supplier perspective too.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like we've been handling emergencies and the be patient part.
Yes.
Now that we're like back, I do feel like, and I've heard from, there's a lot of people out there that feel like everything needs to get done yesterday.
Right.
And there's all this pressure that's being put on. And that's part of, some of the burnout too. But if we just learn to be communicative, of course, like we need to communicate with one another, but be patient, and we're going to get through this together as we have, and we'll continue to do that.
And if you're not, as a leader, living that culture, right? So whatever core values you have identified as a company that draw, your people to work with you and stay with you, if you're not living that in every conversation, like you really, again, have to really double down on that. And if you're, if integrity or communication or whatever your core values are, resiliency, adaptability, doesn't matter, whatever they are, you need to make sure that every conversation you're having with your team member is reminding them of that, reflective of that, because those are the type of conversations we weren't having for 18 months, because we're literally just like, okay, how many times have you wiped down the stairwell? Who's got COVID? You can't go into this person's apartment. And you're just so focused on those emergencies. You've got to get out of that mentality, and people want to go back to it. Change management is difficult. And now everyone's gotten used to this pandemic. And now it's time to change again, going back into this new normal, which we've heard new normal for 2 years. But anyway, it's new normal, and it's going to continue to change.
It's going to continue to be a new normal.
Yes.
The new normal won't be the old normal. And
It will
that's
not.
something else that we need to kind of get used to.
And I feel like I think we always have to adapt to change. That's how we're going to grow as a person, as an organization, as a team, whatever the case may be. So it is new normal all the time.
Yeah.
Evolving normal, I think.
Wait, we won't call it new normal. It's just the current normal.
Yeah. Whatever the
status quo
normal is going to be.
But I think that one thing that we should consider, guys, is that it's getting better, but we have to be part of that solution. You cannot, you're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. As I try to say, you can't ride two horses with one saddle. Sometimes I use a different word, but this is a TAAEF podcast. No, but you can't ride two horses with one saddle. Either you're part of the solution and you are part of the healing, or you're still back there in COVID. And I think that it takes everybody, different time, to kind of get ready to accept what their current normal is and be okay with it. So we just need to keep asking those questions and be there for our teams. I think that's probably the main focus, is that it takes more time to invest in a conversation truly caring and asking those questions than it does to say, where are we at with this, where with this, where with this, where with this. Okay, bye. Thank you for all you do. As you're hanging up the phone or the Zoom call.
So how do we rejuvenate, right?
Yeah.
It's education. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe you get involved in some of your local association courses, classes, designations, and maybe you lovely ladies would be able to maybe tell us about some of the opportunities that are out there that you can get involved with to maybe re-spark your interest and love and passion again for the industry, since everything's kind of going back into person. But there's also alternatives still. I do think there's many online options as well that are still available. But if you need to get out and see some people, Becca, maybe you can speak on some of the opportunities in education.
I mean, I would suggest just for HR folks to encourage this, and for individuals to check out their local association and see what kind of courses they're offering. I think generally, whether it's a yoga class or a class on, or getting your designation, whatever it is, doing something that uses a little different part of your brain than maybe you've been using.
Or walking a dog.
Or walking Kirby can be really helpful and can just sort of rejuvenate you and get you re-excited about things again. And maybe a class could do that.
Yeah. Well, and I would say too, I mean, it won't be the first time you guys have heard this, but they say a body in motion stays in motion and a body at rest stays at rest. And so we have been at bay, like I don't like this, I think there's my, but we have been kind of at rest, but a very tense at rest. It's definitely not relaxing for so long that it's time for us to get in motion. And it's time for us to just put one foot in front of the other. And as much as it might, make you want to roll your eyes to get off the Zoom call and go to that meeting in person, I guarantee you'll be glad that you did, because then there's something about the energy between the three of us sitting here right now that, although all of the Zoom opportunities have been great, it wasn't anything like what's sitting here right now, as far as the energy, the connection, and that's how ideas are generated, and that's how people get inspired, and that's how companies flourish. So I mean, think about the connecting those dots. When you were working on an inspired team, I mean, you just really can't, you can't really explain it, but you have to kind of push through, where you don't just kind of, get off your seat.
Well, another thing about teams real quick is that, there were some great things that came out of COVID with how, and the Snowmageddon, Snowpocalypse, the winter storms. If you've watched the video of Robert Hills, who was the Be the Next Room to Go ambassador, you've seen he gets emotional during the video when he's talking about his team and how they came together to work on the property during the storms. And so let's celebrate that too, because
we've had a lot of truly inspiring stories as well that have been,
and those should be celebrated, and it shouldn't just be like, okay, good job, you did this, now let's do something new, but let's celebrate those things and take that energy and that momentum forward.
So really, on the flip side of things then too, we do need to actually recognize all the amazing situations that people and teams have found themselves in, and embracing opportunities and embracing change and adapting to it. Maybe even, job seekers finding a new organization and maybe rejuvenating some life into that organization and different energy and a different feeling. So do you guys actually have any stories maybe that you can share of anything like that? I know we talked about Robert.
Yeah, there's really a multitude of them. I mean, I don't know one that comes to mind. I mean, I know we kind of have heard those, but I just thought of something whenever you were discussing that, is that, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. The grass is green where you water it. And I think that whether that's a company that's watering the grass or that team member, Mr. Hill just said, like, hey, I'm so emotional about my team and everything. I think he's watering that grass, and his team is growing, right? Because of all of the, the things that we see that go on behind closed doors that we don't even know about, right? All of the, the unsung heroes, I think, that we've discussed. And and one of the things that we talked about with burnout, unfortunately, is it puts you in an emotional, kind of a compromised state. And we don't want you making a decision, especially if it's about your career, whenever you're emotional. And, so if you are in burnout, not saying that you do need to make a change or don't need to make a change, but asking yourself a lot of these questions as far as like, what is permanent? What is my not negotiable? What do I love? Again, with my team, what are the great things? What are the great stories and the things I've seen when we are under duress? But at the same point in time, if you don't hit that, reset button, if you don't address those issues, you stay in that emotional state, it is taxing. It's taxing on your soul, and you won't be fulfilled one way or the other. And we don't want you, whoever you are, to make a decision emotionally that you'll regret in 1 to 2 years and be making another decision. So I think that was kind of the point with the burnout, and I'm sorry, I kind of took it in a whole different direction, but I think that if you're not asking yourself those questions, and as leaders, sometimes you have to ask for your team because they don't know. And that's one thing I will say, many of the people that have been in the middle of burnout that I reached out to or tried to talk to had either no clue or deflected that they were, or fine, everything's fine. And they're in that, I've got 14 stories that are flooding right now. I don't have time to sit here and talk to you, Nicole. No, I'm kidding. I would never. Can you talk to me while you're wetbacking? No, but I think that everyone's in that mentality. And so we do have to, as leaders, make time for those conversations and ensure they hear us,
And take the time, a lot of self-reflection to maybe take the time even to make like a list.
Oh yeah.
Write out, what has been positive, what's negative, how to maybe change those things and find the balance again. Because I think really we're all working from one side. And, even when we try to even it out, I feel like, me personally, I felt like that too. It's really hard to find the balance. And I think me personally have put on that facade as well. Like everything's great, because we're just chugging.
Right.
And we need to chug because, in our industry, it's a servant industry, right?
Yeah.
We're here to serve. We're here to make sure that everyone else is happy or satisfied. So I think it's, about that time to maintain the servant mentality, but also balance yourself out and do that, self-reflect, find that balance so you can move forward in a positive way.
Well, you absolutely cannot fill someone else's cup if yours is empty. And I've heard that so many times, and it just rings true. And if you're not making the time without feeling guilty, we're not saying, leave everybody and go on a 2-year sabbatical unless that's
Are you not?
I mean, no.
Is that not the purpose of this?
Maybe, I don't know. Bye, Blaze. It's been so nice to know you. He's like, I'm out for 2 years. But I think it's just part of the everyday healing. I mean, yes, this was something, like you said, completely unusual and not customary, but it doesn't mean that we're still not going to have people that, go through a divorce or are single parents or just under normal circumstances that are just burnt out, or the spouse loses a job. I mean, all of these other things that now in 2019, those were big deals. They still are a big deal, but now we have this other, this compounded layer between Snowmageddon and and COVID. But I think that you just kind of have to keep chugging through.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Absolutely. I was actually just looking at the time check, just because I don't know how we got 3. So we got the 3 from the gaffer in the back. What else would y'all like to discuss, really?
Well, I have a couple housekeeping.
Yeah.
Becca in her housekeeping almost.
Let's do that.
Sweeping it up.
So our next,
Before the housekeeping, could I just say how great it is to be in a room with y'all? And actually, the energy, you did mention it. The
It's
energy has
true.
been so. I've used my hands so much more that, like, on camera, I'm watching myself more, and I feel like I should be looking at the camera, but I'm like looking at y'all, and I'm like,
Okay.
and I feel like I'm moving too much, but that's just me. And I've noticed that you've been doing the hands
Hey, well,
too.
first of all,
So,
I'm not Italian,
love
but I
you
talk
guys.
with my hands like I am Italian. But
Mama mia.
I know, I think I have to sit on my hands. It's the only way to keep me quiet. So, so
Yeah.
hold on, let me
All right, we're doing
all right,
housekeeping.
so thanks everybody. It was so great to be in person with you guys. These two definitely were a big part of my COVID mental health every week. So that was wonderful and I appreciate it.
Likewise.
Yes.
Next Hints from HR will be August 11th. The summer is going so fast.
Oh my gosh.
And tune in on July 28th for How to Speak Maintenance. If you haven't caught it yet, it is our once a month talk. Jason Fine with Camden is our host, and we talk to different folks in the industry about how we can improve maintenance and office relations and understand all that our maintenance teams do. So check that out, and we will see you soon. And here.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.